I've never been in franchising, and I think there's some good to that, and there's some bad to that. I think, one of the things we've done here at Restore over the last 2 years is get the right people in place that have the right experience. And I think this is one of those cautionary tales I would tell you, franchisees, when you're looking at a franchisees, look at that team, and does that team have the experience that shows that they're going to be able to do what they say they're going to be able to do? Because, and in many ways, as a franchisee, you're betting on the franchisor. You're making an investment in the franchisor, and the best investments are investments in people.
Representing Franchise Secrets, Erik Van Horn.
Hey, Steve, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Erik.
Yeah, we got to know each other a while back, and you've been busy. You've been busy helping restore hyper wellness. Is it restore now, or is it restore hyper wellness?
It's Restore Hyper Wellness. What we're trying to do is improve people's health, and we have a term we call hyper wellness, which is really the passionate and consistent pursuit of one's health, and that's where the trademark hyper wellness comes from, or what it means.
Well, I'm excited about this because we talked a while back, and Restore was going through some challenging times, and like a lot of franchisors do. And I'm excited to talk to you because you're going to be open about the challenging times and how you course corrected a lot of those things. A lot of it stems from growing too fast. And I talk about that all the time talking about growing too fast. And so I think franchisors is a cautionary tale. Franchisees, you're going to understand like how to identify a franchise that might be growing too fast and how to vet them out. And franchisees might be a part of a system right now that is growing too fast and feeling the pain of that. And so there's another side to it, and that's what we are going to talk about. But you're one of the co-founders, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Let's get into a bit of your background, because your background is pretty unique. You don't come from a franchising background, but you come from an entrepreneur who had an amazing exit at a young age. And like a lot of people that do that, you've gone on to build a lot of different businesses in different ways. So why don't you give the audience a bit of background?
Yeah. So I'm a geeky engineer by training. Started my first company, I was 23, called a company called Mitos. We built the back end systems that were used to manufacture vaccines. I didn't know any better as a 23-year-old. Didn't know what a venture capitalist was. Certainly didn't know what an angel investor was. So bootstrapped that. They don't know it, but Merck and Amgen basically paid the bills. Sold that when I was 30. I often say 30 is too young to kind of goof off for the rest of your life. I certainly did do that. And I think, I have seen other people tend to follow one of two paths at that age. When they have big exits, they either, and this isn't judgmental, but they either go live on a beach and kind of become goof offs for the rest of their life. And again, no judgment, nothing wrong with that. Or they become, hey, I'm going to be a billionaire, and they focus on, growing and becoming a billionaire. One of the things I'm most proud of that I believe I took a kind of center road, which has continued to be active, engaged, productive, but also really engaged as a father and a husband and my family and my community. So after selling Mitos, started working around the University of Penn system back in 2008, when Penn was really trying to figure out how to drive innovation. But in that process, pretty quickly realized I was never going to make as a professor, just way too theoretical. I love working with students on ideas, but what you realized was 99% of the kids were just checking a box. But there was that one, student that was passionate about their business, their idea, and there was nothing more enjoyable than working with that student. So got together with a couple of other entrepreneurs, Mike Levinson and Dave Bookspan. All of us had big exits, and we started a company called Dream It. And the idea behind Dream It was to help entrepreneurs take an idea on a napkin and provide a little bit of capital, a lot of mentorship, and try to force that idea to fail or succeed with as little capital as possible. Started for altruistic reasons, but the capitalist in us did take off, or kind of take over once we realized we're on something pretty unique. So fast forward 15 years later now, Dream It's turned out over 400 companies, market caps well in excess of 10 billion. Some of the companies you'll know that have come out of Dream It, been companies like SeatGeek if you're a sports fan, TrendKite if you're in data and statistics, BioMeme if you're in the healthcare space, Redox, Echo. So really big companies that have come out of that. And in that process, we became one of the most active healthcare investors in the country. And Restore was really born out of that. My partner had an idea for this space, and at the time I was running Dream It. Loved the consumer side of things, and the reason I loved the consumer side was we were doing tons of work with kind of the Boston Consulting, McKinsey's of the world. And what you started to see was the consumer's idea of healthcare was starting to go in a very different direction than the actual healthcare system. The consumer started to think about preventative medicine and started to think about proactive health in a way the regular healthcare system just wasn't. So it was clear there was a opportunity out there for a company that would go, and what we do at Restore is we are direct to consumer, we are membership based, we don't take health insurance. We are focused on people while they're healthy, not while they're sick. And that sounds obvious, but that's not how our healthcare system is actually set up. Our healthcare system is, and all the resources our healthcare system go to somebody once they're sick. And we fundamentally believe here at Restore, the best way to improve people's health is to invest while they're still healthy. So got together with Jim Donnelly, and we founded Restore. Jim really was the driving force behind this business from day one. We wouldn't be where we are without him. He was the passion behind this, and really helped scale the business very, very effectively and quickly. And we grew very quickly. And we'll talk a little bit about this. And we're not, you already hit on this, but it is not unique to Restore or even franchising. We have 400 companies at Dream It. We often see, and this is one of the great things about America and entrepreneurship in America, is we go really fast. When something works, we pour gas on it. Everything from the early mid 1800s railroad systems, we put tons of money in it, probably way too quickly, and there were a lot of bad things that happened because of that. Fiber optics in the 90s, the internet in the early 2000s. We are a culture that when something works and is exciting, we put resources to it and go 1,000 miles an hour. And it's unique in America than everywhere else in the world. And we're at Restore, we followed the same path. We clearly had the tailwinds behind us coming out of COVID and grew very quickly. Did a lot right, but we also needed to put some of the infrastructure pieces in place that a lot of companies suffer from not getting in place fast enough.
This is why I'm excited to talk to you, because you have just an experience that most franchisors don't have. And you're talking about things that most franchisors don't want to talk about. But I think some of that is because you've seen it, having that accelerator of Dream It, which, an accelerator that's probably similar to like Y Combinator and whatnot, and with some big exits. So your perspective is very different than anybody that I've had on. I want to get to that. Before that, what kind of exit did you have at 30? Like, what is public out there that you can talk about, or give us a sense? Because I want to go somewhere else with that conversation as well, because it's not just about how much money did you make, but I want to understand, give the audience perspective of that to understand, the decisions that you made when you probably didn't have to work another day in your life, and what's motivating you now, and why did you focus on being a better father and a better husband and things like that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So there's not a lot public. To your point, I was in a position where I didn't have to continue to work. But I will tell you, like most entrepreneurs, it's not the money. I've never been driven by money. Certainly, yes, we need to make money, but that's not. I've always found purpose. And if you look at my career, every business I've worked on, I've been passionate about it. I've been passionate because I think it creates value for society. I have friends that are in certain businesses like alcohol, okay, and making vodka. Super cool. Trust me, it is sexy to be in the vodka business. And there's nothing, I don't disparage this for this. I couldn't get up every day excited to be in the vodka business. I just couldn't. I don't necessarily believe that's for creating a lot of value for society. If I look at the companies I've been involved with, I can say with confidence, every one of them created value for society. That was kind of the number one building block. And then from there, you have to be able to execute, obviously. But that has always been what has driven me, has been the purpose behind creating value above and beyond, leaving the world a better place than I found it. And that's, Restore certainly checks all those boxes. And I think that's one of the unique things about Restore, as we've had some challenges. There's always been a clear purpose within the organization. There's a clear mission of what we're trying to accomplish. I think that allows you to, that number one, allows you to get great people. I think companies, especially today, I think this has changed over my career. people are more motivated, and I think in a good way, by companies with purpose. And Restore has always had that in spades. So, you know, it is a challenge when you're, sometimes, when you've had a big exit, one of the challenges is, all right, what do you do next? There's a little bit of a fear of, I don't want to fail. That's success. I've never been scared of failure. I think failure is part of life. At Dream It, we have companies fail every day. And that's part of the model. And, what is, I think, a little bit different from the rest of my career. And as you said, I've never been in franchising. And I think there's some good to that, and there's some bad to that. I think, one of the things we've done here at Restore over the last 2 years is get the right people in place that have the right experience. And I think this is one of those cautionary tales I would tell you, franchisees, when you're looking at a franchisees, look at that team. And does that team have the experience that shows that they're going to be able to do what they say they're going to be able to do? Because, and in many ways, as a franchisee, you're betting on the franchisor. You're making an investment in the franchisor. And the best investments are investments in people. And so you have to make sure that that leadership team that's there has experience. And maybe it's not always direct experience, but also has done things in life that show that they can succeed at that scale. And I think that one of the things we did pretty early here is, number one, we had the purpose. We've gotten the right people in place over the last 2 years. And eventually we will get the right person in place at the CEO level that has multi-unit experience. I do not check. I'm the only person here that does not check the box of having multi-unit experience. And I think that's an important factor we will need here in leadership eventually.
Attention, franchisors and franchisees. There are 2 really important resources that I want to share with you that will help you avoid costly mistakes and increase your enterprise value. The first is our free Facebook group. It's a community that has over 4,000 franchisees and franchisors in it. When somebody asks a question, they get honest and authentic answers from multiple perspectives. You can join the group for free over at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. The second resource I want to share with you is, if you're a franchisee and you want to be around a community of successful Zs and other brands and in other industries, this is why I created the Franchisee Mastermind. If you want access to the best single and multi-unit owners to know what they're doing, or if you want to be around other multi-brand owners, then you'll want to check out my Franchisee Mastermind. The reason why people join is they want access to my Rolodex, my connections, to each other. They want a shortcut success, both short-term and long-term. Links will be in the show notes or at scalablefranchise.com.
I know some of the leadership. I know some of the franchisees over there, and I like it. Well, one of your top franchisees is also a franchisee with one of my portfolio brands, and so cannot say enough good about him. Let's talk about leadership teams, though. So you had that leadership team. Did the brand outgrow like their ability, the cap, or did you not have the right people from the beginning? Like, explain some of that, because I would imagine there's franchisors out there that's like, I am not sure I have the right leadership team today. What can you tell them looking back with 2020 vision?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I think this is more broad than just franchising. I think, you go through the team that you have that gets you from 0 to 1 million is very different than the team that gets you from 1 million to 10, which is extraordinarily different from the team that gets you from 10 to 100. And I think, one of the challenges often founding CEOs have is, in a positive way, they have loyalty to their team. I think that's admirable. That's why they motivate people. However, they're successful companies. Every single one I have my companies in my portfolio has been successful, has been able to go through that transition of saying, hey, Bob, you're awesome. You're great. Where we're going, this is not the best place for you, and in a very humane way, helping them find what's the right place for them. Certain people within that organization will continue to be able to grow with the organization. Again, that's not everybody, but a decent number of your team will be able to grow into that role. But I think it's key is to also augment key components with that experience that have been exactly where you're going. I think the biggest difference is you need, this is my failings here have all been, I don't know what, I came to this role not knowing what great looks like in franchising. Okay. Now, I'm surrounded by people that do know what great looks like in franchising, but at the time we didn't have that. And I think you make bad decisions when you don't have that. So franchisees, I think you got to look at that team and say, does that team have people on it that knows what great looks like?
So as you've worked with a bunch of founders, how do you advise or bring up to a founder, you might need a second in command, or you might need to give up that leadership role and bring in two people. Like, explain to me how you, advising so many different companies, would have that conversation with that founder, and maybe the questions that they should be asking themselves internally if they're at that cap.
Yeah, I think it starts with painting the vision of where we're going. And a good companies, and again, we'll come back to this hopefully at some point, is with good investors. I also think the other aspect that franchisees have to look is like, who's on the board, who's putting money into this thing, because there's big differences in investors out there. But a good board, a good investors will help the founder and team understand where they're trying to go, and then help them put the right pieces in place to get there. So I don't think it's something you can come in and say, hey, Erik, you have the wrong people. You got to change them. And because first of all, I think that's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. And a part of it's saying, hey, we're setting the expectations. We're putting the process in place. Who can grow into those roles? Because often your best talent will be there from start to finish, because they'll continue to grow as you go. Not everybody will be able to do that, but hopefully a large portion of the team will be able to do that. But again, this comes back to, I'll kind of divert here to investors, is, when I look at some of the franchisees that are out there, one of the things people love about franchising from an investment standpoint is it's capitally efficient. Like, and what's happening on the back end is you're a franchisor, you're going and selling these licenses, and then you're using the capital for that to grow the business. Nothing wrong with that. That is a model that many franchisors have followed. We did not follow that from day one. We raised outside resources and substantial amount of money. I think it's pretty clear if you kind of go look, our investors today are General Atlantic, which is an amazing investor that has grown big scalable businesses. It is Level 5. Level 5 focuses entirely on franchise systems. By having those kind of key rocks at the board level, and having the finance behind that, that has allowed us to make investments above and beyond what the franchisees are investing in the business. And we're in a totally different place because of that. And I think, again, a little bit of, when you're a franchisee, you should be asking yourself before making that investment, like, who's behind this from an investment standpoint? Or is the franchise or just using the dollars from me to try to grow the business? And again, nothing wrong with that, but you're going to get a very different outcome. At Restore, we have invested well above and beyond, tens of millions of dollars above and beyond what the franchisees have put in the system. And the result of that is just we have more scale and ability to do things at a different level than kind of people that are kind of bootstrapping it, if you will, have been able to do.
Can you give some specifics to a founder that is thinking about raising outside capital, and what that structure might look like if they, an example of, they have a handful of successful locations that are corporate owned. Maybe they have a handful of successful franchisees. They want to scale more rapidly and they want outside money. What does that investment structure look like?
Yeah, again, it'll depend a lot on scale. I think what's key with investing, it's getting investors. It's like employees. You want to build out a diverse team. You want, for us, for example, Level 5 was the first, institutional investor we took in. Most of our early money came from family offices. But what we realized at the time was we needed somebody that had been there, done that from a franchising standpoint. Level 5 had done that. What was nice about Level 5, they'd been both a franchisee and a franchisor. I think so because of that, they brought a truly unique perspective. Later, we brought on General Atlantic. General Atlantic is, literally has hundreds of billions of dollars under management, is a very large firm. And they provided the capital at this totally different scale. They had the vision of what, the larger scale looked like. So they were different. So I think with franchisors or founders, I think it's trying to look and say, hey, what do I need? We wanted somebody, one of the reasons General Atlantic was such an enticing investor was they had tons of healthcare experience. Franchising healthcare is very different than franchising a food business. And we wanted a partner that had that background. So I think, founders need to really look, what am I trying to accomplish? And if you're just trying to raise money, first of all, I think that's a mistake. I think the idea of, hey, I'm going to get money. And there's some people out there that think that franchise or investors are just money. And that's a mistake, because if that's all you're getting, it's going to come with ties to it. It's going to make your life difficult. You want somebody that's going to bring value above and beyond those dollars. So the way that typically looks, it is, there's everything from a convertible debt, which is debt that converts into equity. It could be straight equity. It's hard for me to kind of pin that down. I think the first question though is, what am I trying to accomplish? Who are the investors that can help me accomplish that? And then, what kind of resources do I need to accomplish that? Because if you're going to go to investors, they're looking for a return on that. You have to be able to paint the picture, the future state picture. No different than selling to your franchisees. You got to be able to sell to investors. This is what the future state looks like. If you give me $10 million, and we're here today, $10 million later, we're going to be here. And that has to have an economic return. It is that simple. So, I think that's the first kind of key points. Number one, what are you trying to accomplish? How much do you need? And what is it for painting that future state?
So last question on this. So let's go back to the initial investors. It's friends and family, maybe family office or independently wealthy individuals. And it's hard to put a value on a franchise company early on.
Yeah.
So can you talk about how does a franchisor look at value? How does a family office or friends and family look at that? And is that maybe a reason that there might be more convertible notes at that point?
Yeah. And just to define a convertible note for those that aren't familiar, it is basically, it's in some ways a way of punting on valuation. So it's saying, hey, we're going to put money in, it's actually debt, but it's going to convert usually at a discount to the next round. So it could be a 20% discount. So we're putting in money at a convertible note. So we put $1 million in, and it's a 20% discount to the next round. If you then raise money at a $10 million valuation, that $1 million basically goes in at $8 million. That is way oversimplified for anybody from the SEC. I am not giving financial advice in any way, shape, or form, but that's fundamentally how it works. I think it is a good mechanism for those early rounds, especially friends and family, because that lets the institutional investors, the more professional investors, set the valuation down the road. I also, a little bit of a cautionary tale, and I'm seeing this more and more, certainly in the last couple of years, especially in franchising, is just raising way too much money, way too high a valuation, and that has some negative consequences to it. And the other one I'll tell you that I see more and more of that is just mind blowing to me is people are out there selling units before they've even opened up a unit themselves. That is remarkable to me. So if you are a potential franchisee, you should be asking a lot of questions. Well, hopefully we'll talk through the infrastructure that you should be looking for that franchisor to have. But at a bare minimum, they have to be able to prove to you that they can run their own studios, that they can make money on their own studios before they're out selling. Franchisees said, oh, we sold 100 units before they'd opened up one. And all right, good luck. That, by the way, it could work out great, but to me, that's a red flag. That's 10 red flags.
All right, let's go back to growing too fast. So I've been talking a lot more out on social media about us at Front Street. We are a non-traditional FSO. We are an FSO, but we're non-traditional. We are much more aligned with the franchisors that we work with. We're that strategic partner. We're helping them in very meaningful ways, and we just don't sell a bunch of franchises and then leave. That's what a traditional FSO is hired for. Get in, sell a bunch of franchises, and then their contract is done. And that works for the brands that are ready for that and want that. I don't believe, used an FSO, franchise sales organization. I think it was all pretty much organic. Did you guys use many broker networks at all? I don't think
Not at all. No. Now, again, yeah, my partner was an exceptional salesperson. I think we had some real strong tailwinds. This was an area we were first mover by a lot, not by a little. And we were just ahead of the game. People were, most of our franchise sales came from people walking in the door at a restore and saying, hey, this is amazing. Can I do this? That's really what drove it. I think one thing we did really well early on, this came from actually, I'm a weird father. You'll get this in a second, is, whenever my kids have to listen to all my quarterly reviews, they have to listen to all the board presentations. But when I don't understand something, I don't sleep at night. I need to understand something. And when we were trying to figure out, should we franchise? I'd never been in franchising. So I spent 3 months just studying franchising, talking to every franchisor or franchisee I could find, trying to understand the advantages and disadvantages. And I gave that presentation to my children. And as you can imagine, one of the big negatives of franchising is you lose a little bit of control. You're now putting your brand in somebody else's hands. So I presented that as an a risk to my family. My daughter at the time, who would have been about 10, said, "Hey, well, why don't they have to come stay with us for and have dinner with us, and so we get to know them." So we actually, early on, every one of our early franchisees literally had to come. I have a nice guest house on Lake Austin. They had to come stay with us. They had dinner with us. They worked in a studio, and our early decision making on franchising was very good. And at a bare minimum, what we got was people that we knew were committed. If you were willing to come in, God, I have 4 kids. Haven't, at the time they would have been between, kind of 4 and 10. If you could have dinner with us for a couple nights, like you are committing yourself to that business. So we knew what we were getting ourselves into. I think the franchisee also had a really good feel with what we were getting ourselves into. Now, eventually, when you grow too fast, I can't run an Airbnb, so that broke down. But I do think that was one of the better decisions we made in hindsight, because we really knew both parties had a really good understanding of what the other party was bringing and what the commitment level was of the franchisee. So I apologize. I forget the original question. I got off on a little tangent there.
No, I think we're going there. You started to mention it, like what broke. So
Yeah.
like franchise doors grow too fast. I see this all the time, and they don't even realize what's going to break when they grow too fast.
When you've sold all these franchise units, your focus is, I got to help them get open. I mean, that's where the resources of the organization start saying, "Hey, we got to get these guys open," as opposed to, and again, this is natural. We need to put the infrastructure in place to scale. So there becomes a natural divergence, and I think this is why so many companies go down this path. Is that you've sold, now you got to get stuff open, so resources go there as opposed to going into infrastructure. So for us, when I took over about 2 years ago, couple things. The number one was it was clear we needed we needed a strong FAC. And I will tell you again, this is the thing I think the franchisees should be looking for: systems that have a strong, well-organized FAC. We had an FAC, but they weren't involved in our planning process. Literally, our FAC meetings are tied to our quarterly planning process here at Restore. Our entire executive team is part of those meetings, because it is us listening to the person that is closest to the problems and bringing those problems back into the organization and using that as the planning process. It is impossible for me, that doesn't sit in a studio every day, does not run a studio, to understand what has to change to improve the system. So I think that was probably the first, and that was the first goal, and one of the most important goals. The second was, I'll start ticking through the infrastructure things. We didn't have a sales process. So what happened was, our good franchisees that were good at selling and knew what they were doing, they developed a sales process. We had absentee owners that were in their studio once a month, if we're lucky. Those studios had no process for selling. So the first thing we really worked on was a sales process. It wasn't rocket science. It was understanding why the client is there, building a plan for that client, why it was there. And all this will get to, the kind of the formula of the business, but that allowed us to drive conversions and increase conversions and I'm sorry, reduce churn rates, which I'll talk about in a second. We needed to fix SEO. Again, I think franchisees should be asking, "Hey, what are the resources that are going into SEO?" SEO runs so much of demand generation in this world today. The advantage of scale is Google loves scale. You should have advantages when you have large scale. But does that franchise have somebody that's waking up every day driving SEO? Today we have that, and that's why we've seen several 100% increase in SEO traffic over the last year. So I'll stop with those, but the key was, for us, was kind of get the formula of the business working. And what I mean by that is, literally, it is a mathematical formula. And I think almost every business is a mathematical formula. And for us, it is, we know we need to get demand generation. We need to get people in the door. So key number one, acquire people. We need to convert them to become members. And then we got to retain them. And if you get those 3 things, and if you tell me as a franchise owner today how many FTVs, first time visits, you get, you tell me what your your conversion rate percentage, and you tell me your churn rate, I can tell you your revenue. So people tend to focus on revenue, but really it is the underlying variables that drive that revenue that we've focused on and driven. We have 8 steps in our funnel. Every one of those steps, we've had a kind of a roadmap to how do we improve those steps. And that's why we've gone from, shrinking same store sales to, just to give you the last 3 months, have been plus 18%, plus 19%, plus 18%. So we are seeing, really fast growth. It is because we know the formula of the business, and we're driving every decision to that formula. And we have buy-in from our franchise advisory council that helps get buy-in within the entire organization.
This is such basic stuff. This is stuff that we talk to our brands about all the time. This is stuff that most franchisors are not doing too. Like it's not, they're not doing the basics. When did you kind of have that aha moment, or maybe it wasn't an aha moment that we need to change some things? Maybe it was just like this just came to a head and a decision need to be made. But walk us through kind of the mindset on when it's like this is there's an old restore and the new restore and how that came to be.
Yeah. So when I stepped into the role, I spent over a month literally in talking to franchisees. I talked to, I believe, 80+% of our franchise owners. 2-hour long conversations individually, one on one, trying to understand. And what came out of that was different. Everybody was doing their own thing. They'd all adapted. Some of them were doing great things that we need to learn from. Others had no plan in place at all. At the same time, our corporate studios were underperforming our franchise units pretty drastically. And that's a pretty big red flag, because I will tell you, the leadership team here, we didn't have the credibility to go do this, because I literally had one owner say to me, why am I going to listen to you? Your own corporate stores are doing terrible. And by the way, that was emotionally a difficult day, because I didn't have a good response for that. It was a very valid point they brought up. So really what we kind of went back, and we had some key people here at the time. We said, all right, guys, what is the formula of this business? And we literally mapped out, what does it need to, what do we think it is today? At the time it was just a guess. And what do we think it needs to be? What are the key variables? And then we worked on what's the roadmap to improve each one of those variables. We then took that back to the FAC. And by the way, our relationship with the FAC, they disagree with me and the leadership here all the time. That's healthy. That's, by the way, in this building, there are people that disagree. That is a healthy part of culture, is that ability to disagree, talk it through, reach a conclusion, and then go down that path kind of on the same page, even if you're not all totally aligned that that's the right order of sequence. I don't think we've ever had a disagreement, FAC or even within this building, this is the right thing to do. We certainly have had disagreements on what the priority should be at that time, and where should you focus the resources in the short term. So we've been able to get everybody on here are the roadmaps for these different steps within the funnel. And again, we have 8 steps in that funnel. And from that, we've been able to drive and show results incrementally in each one of those steps. So there's a sign on the wall here that's a little by a little is a lot. There was no silver bullet. So, when I stepped in the role, I hoped there was going to be a silver bullet. There was clearly no silver bullet. It was a lot of little things had to change that added up to a lot. And I think that's where we've gotten to. And by the way, we still have a long way to go. We still have franchisees that are not making money, and that's unacceptable. But we got to have the first level of metrics, and we're driving towards that. Next level is coming, and we're getting those in the hands of the franchise owners today. And that's helping them make better decisions and get to kind of everybody doing the same thing. That's the big change is if you're in a franchise system, there's this constant pull between, I'm a franchisee, I want to go do something on my own. And you do want them doing local things. Absolutely. By the same token, it has to have the same look and feel everywhere you go. If you're in Manhattan or you're in Wichita, Restore, it has to feel the same. I think what we're doing, and we're still not there yet, is getting everybody on those same plans. Certainly the sales process has to be the same. The numbers are different. Yes, you're going to charge more in Manhattan than you are in Wichita, but the processes have to pretty much fundamentally be the same.
How long did it take from at the time that you decided to like start working on this stuff, but the time that you started implementing some of these changes or started working on implementation, meaning like you're like, we need a sales process. So you internally and start working with the franchisees on revamping the sales process or implementing the sales process. Like, how long has this whole thing taken? Like, when did it start to where we are today, seeing a handful of months that our same store sales increases consistently?
Yeah, we're about 20 months in. I'll give you a good example. The sales process is a great example where, number one, we went out and hired an outside consultant that this is what they do. We then created a subcommittee on the FAC. That subcommittee was engaged with that outside person, and we also obviously had leadership here, and it took a while. And part of the reason, one of the more interesting things from my perspective, is franchise systems take longer to change. And the reason they take longer to change is, you have more personalities. If I go back to my first company at Mitos, if the leadership team said, hey, we're going to make this change, instantly you were implementing change and going. Here you have a lot of, the advantage of a franchise system is you have a lot of perspectives. that are informed from different kind of experiences. You tend to get better answers because of that, but it does take longer time to take that input in, get everybody on board, and then implement. So I think that is one of the challenges that I think investors, I will caution investors in the market, because I do talk to a lot of private equity firms, is they want results right away on a franchise system, and that's just not the way it works. It takes time to implement change, more so than other businesses. So for us, we're about 20 months in. I think we have another year to go at least to get what we say is great at franchising. And for us, great at franchising is 80% plus of our units getting a payback period that is we think well above market. We're on pace for that for sure. We're actually well above our revenue growth targets, and we continue to outperform. But it took time. I mean, we in many ways we also had to go backwards to go forwards, and that's a hard thing for an organization. It's a hard thing for franchisees to digest. There was times where I basically had to go to the franchise and say, guys, we have 10 people in the company that are doing this. We're going to start from scratch, and we're going to rebuild that team entirely from scratch. The downside of that is you go backwards to do that. Like all of a sudden you had 10 people. Yes, maybe they weren't the right 10, but they were getting things accomplished. But all of a sudden, all right, we have 0 people there for the next couple months. And then it's going to take that new leader, 6 months to build a team. That's hard. If I'm a franchisee, I get it. It's hard to swallow. I want results. I want people doing stuff now. But I think, again, we've built trust over time where they realize everything we're doing, we are waking up every person in this building every day, waking up, how do we drive franchisee profitability? And how do we do that through the Restore formula that we're all bought into, which is acquire, convert, retain. That is the formula. Everything's put through that lens.
Looking back, could you have revamped that sales process faster or differently or better?
Yeah, I think this is where a leader that would have had multi-unit experience that I don't have would have been able to do things faster and better. I think that is, if we had to go back and do it, I would have gotten a CEO in place faster that had that experience. So can it be done faster? Yeah, for sure. I think we're also, we have some unique challenges in our business that we are in a healthcare industry, and it creates some unique challenges. We have to deal with 50 different medical boards, 50 different nursing boards, 50 different pharmacy boards. That regulatory kind of challenges means we do have to be more methodical as we make changes than, if I was selling vending machine, putting cupcakes in them. So I think every business is going to be different. I think we're unique in the fact that we're a more complex business. I actually think that's huge barriers to entry that we have that most franchisees don't have, is that complexity of the business. And we made the decision very early on that we were going to build out a system that was compliant, that would be, anybody can open up the hood, and any regulator could say, yes, they're doing it right. And it's tough because some of our competitors have taken a different path. And, I think from the end, we will benefit from that. Hey, we're going to build this right. We're going to put the right infrastructure in place, and we're going to, follow the regulations. And I think that's going to benefit us over the long haul, but it hasn't always been easy.
Well, you like to add value. I think you added a lot of value to the audience today for franchise buyers, franchisees, franchisors, people that want to franchise their business. I think you provided amazing perspective on the things that can go wrong and how to course correct and how to be a good leader. Is there anything else that you would want to leave the audience with?
No, I'd encourage, especially the audience that is franchisees or people looking to get in the franchise systems, know that it's a marriage. It is, you're investing in that franchisor. Really do your due diligence. Make sure you know who you're getting involved with. Make sure you know who the investors are. Talk to every franchisee you can find not the ones they tell you to go talk to. Go talk to the ones they don't give you to talk to, so you get that perspective. Because I think in the end, I think the franchisee model is a great model. It is great for this country. It is great for the economy. I do think there needs to be more transparency out there, and I think franchisees need to be more diligent in that due diligence process. And I think franchisors need to be more transparent in that process as well. And I think that's one of the things we're striving for here as an organization. And I think over the very long haul will do us well.
Perfect. Well, thanks for coming on. I have a list of more questions, but I can't get to them. Maybe another day. So thanks again, Steve.
Thanks, Erik.
Thanks for listening to the Franchise Secrets podcast. Links to everything can be found over at franchisesecrets.com. And if you want my help with anything from starting your own franchise to growing your current franchise business, please visit scalablefranchise.com.